Awesome.
Hey,
We're
Andy.
live.
Hey,
How's it going?
good. How are you?
All right. My cursor is up your nose. Hold on. I have to move that. No, it's not really there. I made you scratch your nose. See if I can do it again. Is your nose itchy? Is it itchy? Is your nose itchy, Corbin?
It was itchy.
I'm doing that. Are we live yet?
Yep, we're live.
Oh, then I should stop scratching people's noses with my cursor. Okay, welcome to concrete5 Town Hall, April 2019. Adjust my headset here. Hi. So let's jump right into it. What do we got going on here? Let me move my agenda down so I'm not staring above your heads. I'm staring right into your eyes. Let's see. First off, Mike Larson has got all of the responses to the karma surveys in. Looking at some very detailed spreadsheets on feedback and how points work. And yeah, there's some really interesting ideas in there. So in broad strokes, let's see what we've learned so far. Some really good feedback that just a clear getting started page, almost a signpost for new concrete5 users would be valuable. I think that is probably true in broad strokes for concrete5 as a whole. I know we've did a little bit of that when we redesigned the marketing site, but that was, 5 years ago. So we definitely need to get Gary in there and spend some time kind of putting together, hey, you should check out Slack, you should check out this, you can do that, you can earn karma points, and those are worth stuff. I just think that the basic explanation is a bit buried. That is good feedback. Another piece of feedback that was pretty good in there, I thought, was we have been challenged at kind of trying to figure out the varying amounts that activity should be worth in terms of karma points. The original system was pretty top hat-ish in terms of just we'll pull something out. And a suggestion was made that we should guesstimate the perceived amount of time that would go into doing whatever the action that we're awarding a point is, and have some kind of unified value of, an hour of time is worth X karma points, and kind of use that as a guide. So you don't have 2,000 points for something and 2 for something else. So I thought that was an interesting way to think about the problem that we had not come to on our own. So thank you for that. There's some really detailed comments around point distribution and the way that the forum works, and particularly the forum around the PRB. So it's the peer review board, and there's a system that, unless you're a marketplace developer or in the peer review board, you haven't had no exposure to. But it's actually one of the beefier parts of the concrete5.org community stuff that we've built, and it does all kind of workflow and approval and back and forth around add-ons and themes that are being added, keeping that ecosystem healthy and whatnot. But there are some kind of accidental ways that you can probably get points that maybe aren't as equal to what people are doing in other parts of the community. So we should just look at that a little bit more thoroughly. I don't think that we've ever circled back around it and been like, hey, wait a minute, like, the person doing the reviewing should get more points than the person who is responding to the reviews on their own add-on and things like that. Was happy to see third-party integration ideas in there. So get a pull request approved in GitHub, get some karma points. That makes a lot of sense. We've been talking about that in broad strokes, but it's cool to see other people, bringing that down a level for us into reality. And then last but not least, easy win. If you attend one of these exciting town halls, you should absolutely get a badge and some points. That came up as an idea, and that seems like a real let's do it kind of moment. So we'll get Gary on making a badge for attending the town halls, and somehow we will keep track of who's doing that. We should have like I don't know, we're hanging out in Slack. Corbin, we can probably figure out some way to see who is actually live and present.
We can go on Scout's Honor.
I'm touching the computer. I'll stop touching the computer. It won't be so bouncy. Sorry. Okay, so there's karma points. Moving right along. Friday tutorials. So we threatened we would do this too long ago, that we would start doing training and certification again. And we would just set up a time on Fridays to just always do that. We got a little stuck in the weeds on that. I mean, first we got into kind of end of the year busy stuff, and a lot of our compliance work that we're doing for the Army has been kind of culminating in our ISO and FedRAMP approval that is imminent. So been a little busy, but that's no excuse. I think we also got a little derailed in, as is easy to do, in kind of what is the perfect solution to this. Like, should we have like a trade wins company like the old Microsoft Access examples, where you're really building a fully functioning application that we've thought out beforehand? We dug up our old certification syllabus. We had some back and forth around, what is the overarching direction and how much prep should we do for this thing? And I think we've come to the idea that like it really does, we're overthinking it and thereby doing nothing about it. All we really need to do is just set up a time and maybe call it a lab more than maybe a training class. We're not trying to sell it or anything. So I think what we're going to do is just put Corbin in charge of that. We're going to start it up on the 19th, April 19th, which is not next Friday, but the Friday after, or what, the Friday, 2.5 weeks from now. We'll do it at noon Pacific, and we'll let Corbin drive on that, and Mike will record and take notes and ask leading questions. And we'll just play that by ear and kind of week by week figure out something to talk about. And some weeks it might be kind of novice, some weeks it might be kind of detail oriented, but I'm sure we will get lots of good feedback out of it, and hopefully we'll get some stuff that we can, out of recording it, we can reuse for training videos on YouTube and that kind of thing. So April 19th, noon Pacific, we'll put it on the calendar and post to the blog, all that kind of stuff. Shout outs. We're into shout outs. Andy, do you want to talk about GitHub commits and anything going on in there?
Yeah, so over the past couple days, we've been pulling in some pull requests for the next point release maintenance version of concrete5 8.5.1. Not too much is going into that, but there will be some important improvements for people encountering some bugs with 8.5.0. Notable people in adding code to that release include M. Locati, as always. He's kind of fixed a couple errors that people that I think are plaguing people who are trying to install concrete5 on certain in certain environments. Everyone in the concrete5 Japan team has some pull requests in there. That includes Derek, Biplob, Katz, and Hishi. They all have pull requests in 8.5.1, so nice work to all of you. And Heffley me as well, getting some fixes for working with user selector attributes. There might be a couple more things that we pull in time for 8.5.1 release tomorrow, but that is where that stands. So thanks everyone who has been committing in GitHub. We will pick up the pace a bit on getting some of those older pull requests into different branches of concrete5 soon. We've been kind of running around doing some other things lately, but look to be merging some of those larger pull requests back into the core sooner rather than later. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for all of these pull requests that are making their way into 8.5.1.
Nice. Thanks, Andy.
Yep.
Next on our agenda here, we have shout outs to the community and Slack. Mike, do you want to do that? Corbin, who wants to?
Yeah, I can do that.
All right.
So this is Mike. Yeah, as usual, it's impossible to come up with a comprehensive list, and so it's always a little tentative to pick out specific examples, but I'm going to do so anyway with the notice that I'm missing most of you. There's so much that goes on in Slack and other places that makes the community such a strong place, a sharing and caring place that makes everyone feel welcome, and yeah, it's a really great place to learn. So a couple of things I noticed. There were some hiccups in upgrading 8.4 to 8.5 for some people, and there was a really long back and forth with Danu and Emlikati and a couple of other people trying to help people get upgraded there, and that was just a really amazing. It went on for several hours, but eventually everything was solved, and it was just a really impressive example of how everyone jumps in to help out. Another example was A3020 and our own Andrew. We're helping out with someone having a problem uploading some large files to the file manager interface, which was fixed relatively quickly. Deke also helped out with some undocumented functionality using some filter on page attributes. I personally couldn't follow it as deeply as I would have liked, but he was definitely helping out, and it's a stage I would like to get to sometime where I'd be able to jump in and help out. Another thing I wanted to point out is not necessarily on Slack. There's also the forums and the documentation site. I believe it's pronounced Sharok, Shahroq. Created a new tutorial on manually resetting passwords, which I know personally I have locked myself out of my own concrete site in the past, and so that's a really useful tutorial to have. So thanks for everyone in the community participating and helping each other out. It's one of the things that makes concrete5 a great place to be.
Thank you. Great job, Mike. Thanks, Andy. And thanks for everybody who's on the list, and as Mike says, who has been very helpful and not on the list as well. Awesome. Let's see. I think Andy already briefly touched on 8.5 versus 8.51. We got an 8.51 release coming very soon.
Yeah, we're going to do that tomorrow. It's pretty no huge updates in there, but I think there are some issues in there that are keeping people from installing concrete5 on Softaculous and some other spots. So we want to get that out there. So it shouldn't cause too much. There's also a thumbnail bug fix that we need for some of our own sites. So yeah, we'll be getting that out tomorrow.
Nice. Well, we were forging right through here. So last month we did a show and tell and showed off a project we had built, Brand Central, which is a digital asset management system built on top of concrete5. And we kind of gave people a quick demo of how the front end works. Talked a little bit about how it had been built on top of Express, and it was pretty awesome times. We also threatened at that point that we were going to release it open source. We then proceeded to do nothing about it for 3 weeks and have been working on releasing it open source now. So I know you were given that task last minute. Corbin, have made any progress on open sourcing Brand Central?
Yeah, we have split out that the major bits of that project into a package. We typically do package based development, but there was some extra work in making it compatible with Composer and making sure that all of our configuration stuff worked properly. So we got that fixed and pushed up to a new repository under the concrete5 project name. So you can get to that by going to github.com/concrete5/brand central. Yeah, check it out. You can pull it in with Composer, and it'll, install over your current site with sample content, and we'll take a base concrete5 install and turn it into something that is super powerful and able to handle all kinds of categories of different kinds of assets that you might use for a business and an online web presence. So yeah, it's up there.
Oh, there you go. There's the link.
Nice work, Corbin.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And I think that begs a quick comment on it's an interesting kind of shift in philosophy for us, I guess, that Brand Central is really an application built on top of concrete5. So it was not designed with the idea that you would install it as an add-on and it would work with everything in the marketplace. It uses kind of a combination. I mean, it's built on top of Express, but there's some React-based front-end GUI that just kind of has to exist. We had an interesting debate internally around how much time do we want to spend making it flexible so you could install it in any concrete5 site, versus where we ended up is we want to really still use the same code base that we just released open source as the core of the live product we support for the Army. I don't want to fork the thing and have to manage two. We're not, it's free, both in terms of code and cost. So that would quickly lead to it just being orphaned. I think it's an interesting idea to use concrete5 as an application framework. It's got a really nice editing interface. Something like this is a great example because there is stuff that's application-y. There's collections and assets, and it's you're putting things in a light box and all that kind of digital asset management stuff. We've built a few of these sites with concrete5 for different folks over the years, and they always want to have kind of like a blog section too. There's this desire to have this kind of organic area where you can put together style guides and make posts about how well some trade show went, and kind of this mix of functionality, kind of app-driven, hardcore functionality that you would design with wireframes, build, and then just kind of be stuck with. And the more kind of in-context editing, organic, hey, I have a page type I want to add to it stuff. So I think concrete5 does really well that way. And this digital asset management system that we're putting in GitHub, but we haven't actually put in the marketplace at concrete5.org, is an interesting kind of shift in strategy around kind of making the assumption that, yeah, you should install this on a fresh concrete5 install. Like, this is not meant to necessarily play nice with your other stuff. Certainly could. I mean, we're not actively trying to make it not do that, but it's just it's a whole level of work that I guess there's always a price to pay for that flexibility. So we have chosen to not pay that price on this. I think that segues well into introduction for the show and tell this week, which is all about community store. So in legacy concrete land version 5.6 and earlier, we had an e-commerce add-on, and it was in the marketplace. We built it. I don't remember why we built it. Did we build it for somebody, or we just decided we needed it, I think? But we were young and full of hope, and built it because, of course, you need to sell stuff with your website. We sold it at the marketplace for $125, which was a tricky price point because it was pretty expensive for someone who's shopping for open source because they're primarily on a budget. They come and look and they're like, whoa, $125. I was ready to spend 10. On the flip side, there's no meaningful e-commerce solution out there that costs a one-time $125 fee. Even your Shopify's and your kind of software as a service lightweight carts are 20, 30, 40 bucks a month, and that adds up over time. It just doesn't feel like a big check up front. So we found it to be challenging supporting our e-commerce add-on, wanting to deliver a good experience for somebody who had just picked it up in the marketplace, who had maybe spent, to their budget a lot of money, which we certainly respect. And we want to make sure it's working well, but now you got to make sure it works with every theme on Earth, and you can't actually get into their system to support the thing, and a real challenge. So when version 7 came along and all this stuff needed to get rebuilt, we decided to not rebuild the e-commerce add-on. We're passionate about digital communications. We're not really that passionate as individuals about selling stuff online. Certainly get no problem with it, just not why we wake up. And we kind of left a hole in the ecosystem. Into that void stepped Ryan Masuva, who has built a add-on called Community Store. It has existed in GitHub for quite a while now. I think it first started supporting version 7, and it's grown quite healthily. There's multiple live production sites built with it, and I think it has a lot of the approach that we would probably come up with on our own with a whiteboard, like using attributes and that type of thing. So I am not that familiar with it. I know some of the other folks on the team have poked around at it a bit and say it looks pretty cool, but this is the first town hall where I'm going to get to sit back and really learn about something that I'm excited about and perhaps can use and help sell to some folks. I know this is an active product, but it kind of sits outside of the concrete5.org website right now. So with all of that introduction, I would toss it to you, Ryan, to kind of give us a here's what it does. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm glad you're feeling excited, Franz. That's important to me. So I think you've sort of introduced inadvertently the reason why Community Store came about, and it was the lack of e-commerce for 5.7, and we, as a business, we had used the e-commerce for 5.6 multiple times for projects, and it was solving lots of problems for us. But then that sort of disappeared. So we did come up with a snip cart add-on, but that doesn't. It's sort of a different market. It's more a quick thing. So yeah, Community Store's been running for a couple of years now, and it is something that's evolved. And I'll point out, it's not just me that's been working on it. That there's a reason it's called Community Store. I might be, I guess, de facto leading it, but there's lots of contribution at the moment. Yeah, so the main goals of it, and I'll talk about, I guess, a quick sort of summary of it, and then I'll talk about what's been happening recently and sort of the future of it. So the main goals of it, and at least from my perspective, is that we needed something that we could roll out when we have projects where it's more a site that might have shop components with it rather than your traditional, I have a site that's 100% a shop. You take your Shopifys or other systems, they're great at saying, I just want to sell stuff and I want to sell hundreds of different items. But we found, as far as projects went, we might have an organization website, and then they might want to sell tickets for something, for 2 months of the year, or some t-shirts, or just something ad hoc. Or it might be a membership platform where they wanted to sell digital access to something. And when we looked at open source things, OpenCart and PrestaShops, to take them and sort of add the features that we would be losing from not having concrete5, it was just an impossible task. So we sort of said, well, if we want these projects in the future, from a business case, we'll need to have something that can do those things. So so that's why a lot of that energy's been put in. From a technical point of view, I would say it's more towards the developer rather than the end user. It is pretty easy to install, and out of the box it works sort of as a standard add-on. But the real focus is to give the power to developers who might want to override a block template or a single page for the checkout and start to customize things like that. Customize shipping methods, for example, which there's always some weird combination that someone wants that. So we build it, I guess, for ourselves, but also thinking that others will be having that same challenge, that same sort of thought. So now, can I share my screen here? Is that
you roll down to the bottom?
Like that.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
Here we go. Cool. So so in terms of what's been happening recently, we've had I did a release last night, pushed up a release 2.14. That's just a bug fix release, but the last few have been quite big in the sense that there's been a huge amount of code cleanup, and Noor has been absolutely amazing with that help. He's been working on some of the upgrading between the version 1 of Community Store and version 2, plus a whole bunch of tidying up code and legacy stuff. So now the code base is getting to the point where there's very little deprecated code, and we're feeling much more confident that as it goes forward to version 9 of concrete5, that this will have the legs to get there, as opposed to trying to support 5.7 as well. This new version is sort of shiny and tidied up. So that's where we are at the moment. There's sort of too many features to really talk about. Like, I won't go through them individually, but a fair comparison is the e-commerce for 5.6. It's got pretty much the same feature set. But in terms of what's been added more recently, things that maybe I don't think were in e-commerce, recently added a attribute filter. So we've got products here, and a product can have, I'll just click through to one here. A product can have attributes, and now these are the actual native concrete5 attributes, and they can be associated with a product. And then we've got a block that then can filter our list of products here against those attributes. So this is automatic here. We can pick which attributes we want, and we can filter and say, well, let's bring up all the products that have got gold in there, or we can filter to different prices and that sort of thing. So this is something that was asked a few times and asked for a few times, and it's like, well, that's not exactly an easy thing to build, but that's been added in the last few months, and it's being used already on some fairly big multi-billion-dollar company, international company sort of website. I can't say who, but it is being used by some big names, which is good. The other probably more exciting feature for people is that we've now got full multilingual support, which means that you can run the front end of your site, including all of the product names, the descriptions, and the checkout in multiple languages, including the cart. So the best example of this, and Michael Jensen Mara from concrete5 Denmark has put together a really amazing demo version of the site, much better than I could put together. One where he's customized it with custom templates and sort of shown that you're not really limited by the code. You can do these sort of extra fancy things, but it's a perfect example in terms of the multilingual. So at the moment I'm viewing here in English, but if I go up the top here and I switch my language over to Danish, all the products there have been translated, including the cart and the checkout, and we can see all of that's been translated. But at any point, we can go back up here and change it back out to English. So that was another thing that people had sort of said, oh, look, especially people in Europe, Switzerland, they're dealing with 4 languages. It's an expectation now to say, well, yes, we can do your sites in multiple languages. So that means the shop component, well, why can't we do that? So yeah, so that's been added, and it's a finished feature. We're still testing a few bits and pieces with it, and we're just sort of say thanks to Michael for his testing of this and feedback. There's a lot of language things that I might not necessarily, or being a single language person, things that I wouldn't immediately think of, or ways of handling it that he pointed out, and lots of testing, so that's been great. So yeah, the way that works is that there's some translation pages of the dashboard, and we've got the products, and they can be translated, all the descriptions, the attributes and options, all of those things can be translated on a product level. But we've also got common translation. So instead of having to translate colors or the word blue for every product, you can put them in sort of as a pool of commonly translated strings. And we've also got all of the pieces that are output in the checkout. So the names of payment methods or discount rules or that sort of things, and even the headings that are in the emails. Even the receipt email is translated as well, which is important. You don't suddenly want to get a different language email and you've been going through the checkout in a different language. So yeah, so that's the other major feature. Noor's been working on and has finished changing the images over to use the thumbnail system from the file manager, so you can either build these on the fly or refer to a thumbnail. He's been working on the tax as well. He's been doing heaps of awesome stuff. So yeah, so I think in terms of sort of the rest of the features, I think it's one of those cases where I should just point people to say, download the release, have a bit of a look. With any questions, there's an e-commerce Slack channel, and I visit that a fair bit. So if there's any questions about how do you do this, I'm always happy to help there. The final tab I've got here is that whilst this is not on the marketplace, and it probably won't ever appear because of it being a big, complex open source project, it has been pushed up to the translation system. So that means that you can pull in translations. I don't know where it is, isn't it? So, where we do this, I won't do this now. At the moment, we've got Danish and French. We've actually got more translations than that from the original efforts. But once they get pulled into here, we should have Italian and a few other languages as well. And that's great because instead of us having the old translation system or it having to be sort of done offline, this central place is fantastic. It works great. And it means you can install the package from GitHub, but grab the translations automatically through the dashboard.
Nice.
Yeah, so in terms of sort of the future from here, as I was saying, it's a little bit of a case of we want some stability now. Now that we've got over some big hurdles, the attributes are all sort of tidied up. I don't have any plans to add any major features at this point. I really would like to just focus on some of the minor niggly sort of things.
Sure.
And I've started on some doco as well. I'm hoping to sort of put up a what's it called, a markdown driven documentation site on GitHub. And yeah, I think just some reworking of things. So it's just about stability and the features that we've got there. We can build full shops. We've got 8 or 9 different payment gateways, different shipping methods. So nothing major from here, just sort of keeping it as a good resource. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Ryan. That's an excellent high-level demo and super cool to see you leading something here that I mean, it's obviously an important part of the ecosystem. You're trying to sell websites. You're going to need to talk to people who sell stuff with the websites. It's kind of it's a no-brainer. So you've done a great job pulling that stuff together. One question I had when you were demoing with the multilingual support, do you have a currency support for that, or is that something that you're hearing from people that want to sell things in dollars and euros, or not so much?
Look, the advice that I've been given is to not try and do multiple currencies on the same site. It just becomes difficult with payment gateways and people do they're used to paying in one currency and converting on their credit cards. Yeah. I mean, the number of times I'm paying for something in US dollars, a bit of software or something, it's a bit of a no-brainer. So you can obviously change the currency and the currency codes and things you can use, but no, I don't think we'll go down that path.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, we had that question at one point. We do have a client that's not using concrete5 stuff for the commerce, just the content, and they do sell in native currencies, and it looks like an absolute nightmare. Like, yeah, because there's never a conversion. It's always like they want a different price for different markets, but then you have to switch between them, and yeah.
I've added to some sites like a sort of an on-the-fly conversion. So yeah, might grab some live rates every few hours, and then you hit a button and says, "Oh, that price is in so many pounds." But even with that, I remember someone saying that if they have a run on a currency or something, they're sometimes scrambling to say, "Oh no, we don't want to show that. We have to adjust the prices up and down." And it's an international market. I don't think people are expecting, unless it's Amazon or something, to be able to pay in their native currency necessarily. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then like the long tail of support nightmares. Like I remember buying some piece of software on subscription when I was in the UK for the team. We're in the US, like we're a US business entity, but like, you know, internationalization is such a weird goofball that like I ended up getting charged in pounds, I think. Yeah, I think it was in pounds. And like, and you know, they price it different for different markets. If you're going to do that, you're like, oh, it's 125 things And it's like, well, I'd rather pay $125 to be frank. Like, if we're gonna just pay 125, and then I come back here to the States, and like 3 months later, I'm like, oh man, I'm getting charged in pounds, and I'm getting charged like a transaction fee with my card. And so now I've got to call this company up and be like, can you please switch? And like, I can only imagine the horror of their support staff of like, okay, like you have an account, but we have a business unit for this and a business unit for that, and yeah, smart on you for not bothering with that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Q&A. Corbin, do we have any questions that we should
Yeah, we've got a question or two.
Right.
Starting out from John the Fish. This was after the discussion about training. With regard to training time, have we looked into what time it is in Europe on noon on Friday, and would we consider doing a different time slot so that it's not so late at night for folks in Europe?
Yes, that is late in Europe. We are aware of that. That is not by design, but more by just practicality. Our Friday mornings are reasonably booked. I think that's going to be a Corbin question more than a Franz question. Maybe we don't do it Friday. Maybe we find a way to do that. I definitely acknowledge that we have a large crew in the UK and Europe that we're not really serving very well with a noon Pacific time zone. Not even all that great for the East Coast. It's really just kind of like, well, here's a window that's open. So yeah, that is a good point. How's that for a non-committal answer?
Yeah. If there's a better time slot that works for you, John, feel free to forward that to me, and we can definitely think about it. The slot that we have now was definitely thrown together with convenience on our end in mind. So if there's a slot that works much better for both of us, I'm absolutely open to it. So yeah. The next one is from Stu Black. He asks, when our developers are working on a project and have separate database versions, what's our method to manage merging those databases at this time?
Ooh, that's a good one. Merging those databases, I would say that doesn't generally happen. Usually what we're doing is we're taking a centralized stage that we set up in our environment. So we'll have, when we actually start a project, we get through architecture, we will have a separate phase that is infrastructure set up. And so that's going to be Evan and Thomas setting up, hey, here's where we're going to have our stages for content review, client review, and the live environment. At the same time, we'll get developers spinning up a copy of that repo out of Bitbucket, and for some of our larger stuff, we'll have a sanitized database. So we'll have some routines that we can run to pull down a copy of the live database and do things like strip emails out and that kind of stuff. But we don't have an automated way for a developer that might be building content in a local stage to select some of that content and merge it up into a live database. That is not a tool I have today, if that's what the question is. I don't know if Andy, you want to speak any more to that?
Yeah, it's not really. It's definitely something we've scratched our heads about in the past. It's not something typically, if you've got multiple developers working on different pieces of functionality, all of which have some kind of content related component, what it really ends up being is that developer is responsible for either maintaining that package in such a way that the package will create everything that it needs. So if a package, typically if a package has some components it installs, like some attributes or some single pages or some page types, the package takes care of installing that stuff. And then we, like Corbin said, we do package-based development. So then when that's ready to get onto the stage that Franz mentioned, we'll deploy those packages up, and then we'll reinstall them in the stage database. And that will reinstall that content into that new database. And then after a while, local development databases will get out of sync because, you know, developer A will not have the code installed necessarily from developers B and C. And so it makes sense every once in a while to take the stage database, which is a much closer representation to what you're going to ship, and sort of bring that down for all the developers, and mirror it back down, and then just kind of repeat as necessary. And then, yeah, it's a little bit, sometimes that involves manual checklists, you know, keeping track of, you know, I know that when I deploy this code to the live site, I'm going to have to create this content. And it's not glamorous, but it works for us.
Nice. The next one we have is from A3020. He's bringing up an issue that was brought up by Ramon a few days ago. Ramon was saying, you know, it'd be nice to have somebody dedicated to reviewing and merging pull requests in the concrete5 repository, just so that there's more movement. There had been some concerns on some slowness of some of the simpler pull requests. And so the question is actually, do we expect any changes upcoming in the future? I know we've been pretty slammed these last couple of weeks, and then on top of that, trying to get 850 out in time has definitely put a damper on a lot of those, just the morning spent looking at issues and things like that. So I personally feel like that's going to be different as we're, in the middle of a cycle and not towards the end of a release. Did you want to speak to that at all, Andy?
Yeah, I think your intuition on that front is totally correct. Like, the velocity always picks up when we're not trying to dial things down. And 850 had the kind of, it had the uncomfortable tension of balancing a bunch of changes that we had to make for business reasons and otherwise, with, an ever moving, kind of shifting release schedule of our own. So we had sites that we had to put on it, and portions of that site, those sites had to work in a certain way and have features that basically held everything up. And so when we're working on that, we can't be looking at the core. In terms of deputizing a community of people that can actually merge pull requests, we actually are unable to do that. In the past, we might have I don't know if we would have entertained it. In the past, we might have entertained that and done something like that. Now we actually are contractually obligated to not do that. So no is the answer to that. But I can tell you that pull requests that have reviews on them get merged in much more quickly than pull requests that don't. And I do reviews. Corvin does reviews. If I do a review and the pull request looks fine, I'll frequently merge it unless we're just kind of juggling. Also, the sad reality is that the velocity of 850 and the release schedule that we had on it meant that certain things opened up against develop were just going to sit because we weren't going to merge in a potentially breaking change at the 11th hour, no matter how simple it was. So that's why we have multiple branches there now. So there's a 9.0 branch that is pretty bleeding edge, and kind of in a weird state. There's now an 8.6 dev branch, which is going to be our 8.6 version, which we will probably put some of the bigger feature pull requests against. We'll just merge them against that instead of develop. And then develop's going to be 851, 852, etc., because that is the default branch that it goes into. So it's we are juggling a fair amount of overlapping versions and overlapping requirements to those at this point. So I can tell you, I agree with Corvin that we are going to, those things are going to drag less. Also, if you look at the branches, and you have, it never hurts to ask which one to submit it against. If it's a major change that touches 30 files, and we're, in an 850 release candidate, but develop is still the 850 branch, it's probably not, it's probably going to sit if it goes against develop until 850 is released. So that's a long-winded way of saying we have no plans to do that at this time, nor could we even if we wanted to. But we always act on reviews, and reviewed pull requests get attention more frequently than those without.
Yeah, I can add some light to that tunnel as well. As Andy and Corbin have both implied, We have been in a very big push for us for, I don't know, like 6 months at this point. Like, as you guys know from the announcement we made a better part of a year ago, we closed this large compliance deal with the Army. So last year for us has been very exciting, but it's also been putting together a bunch of new people that are bringing a bunch of new concerns and documenting processes that we never really knew that we even had, that we just kind of organically did, but putting them on paper, and we're there. Like, all that stuff is wrapping up in real time. There's what they call controls, which are basically just rows on a spreadsheet of, well, how do you do this? How do you do that? Some of them are technical, some of them are operations. For the FedRAMP compliance that we're doing, there's a better part of like 380 some controls that we have to meet. And last time I looked at the spreadsheet, I think we were down to like 2 that weren't already completely done. So it's definitely been an awful lot of work, and it's been a weird one because it's like usually when we've had one of these, just kind of heads down, I can't accept anything that isn't part of what we're doing efforts. It's been something that we have driven ourselves and often has a lot of front end interface stuff to it, right? Like, we're working on version 7, leave us alone, or we're adding attributes in version 6, leave us alone. And this, there isn't a lot of glamorous stuff to it. Like, if you look at all the password, there's a bunch of changes around passwords and that kind of stuff. But just the amount of work that has gone into dealing with SCAP and STIG reports and qualsys scanning, and just feverishly running around trying to achieve these compliance levels that were there. So we are mere tiny steps away from being FedRAMP ready and ISO 27001 certified. SOC 2 will happen after that. We haven't started that one, but we're getting it. Like, the team has figured out how to work together nicely. We have circled all the problems and solved them. So I think what Corvin and Andy are implying of, hey, we're coming up for air on this stuff, and it should be a little bit easier for us to start looking at different pull requests is pretty fair, because we've been doing all this compliance stuff and also building Brand Central and some other sites that we haven't told you about and that kind of thing. The other bit that Andy has commented on about, hey, if you can help review this stuff, I can't stress that enough. We are contractually obliged to do that as well. So in everything that we do at this point, somebody else has to review your work. So, I'm watching in Slack, Andy asked Corvin, hey, can you please review my pull request, and vice versa. So, and that actually, like, you guys can be as much part of that equation as us. Like, if there's somebody else looking at work that's going into GitHub and they say, hey, this works for me, I've tested it, I've done this and that actually is really valuable to us, and will totally fly. Like, that makes it a lot easier for us to do the review. We can say there's been peer review, and peer review is part of what we're selling. So yes, and yes. Stop talking.
That's something we should. I know we've talked about doing karma points for like accepted pull requests and things like that, but that's something we should see if we can get out of the GitHub API as well, because reviews are just as important as anything else in GitHub, and they grease the wheels, so to speak. So
and that is, we've designed that into our process diagrams. I've been explaining to a chief information security officer, it comes from commercial software, that like, no, actually we do this with security as well, that like, if someone submits a security incident, like, we actually depend on any number of open source folks to come and be like, yes, that seems valid, or no, that doesn't seem valid. We look at it too, but we want you guys to be part of that process. So there you go. Anything else, Gordon? What do you got?
We do have more. I wanted to add to that. I'm not really adding anything, but I did want to emphasize your 2 points with the fact that reviews are super duper helpful. To me, a lot of the time, thorough review is almost as good as somebody merging, because I'll take a cursory look at it, but I very much so trust a lot of folks out there who are putting in these reviews. And on top of that, I personally get a huge amount of value out of reviewing stuff. And a lot of the time, at least for me in my past, I haven't added like comments. There used to not be such good infrastructure around reviewing and adding feedback and that sort of thing. But really looking at other people's code and doing my best to understand it was probably the biggest thing in my career that elevated me to the point where I can look at my own code a couple weeks later and not feel overwhelmed. So I definitely highly recommend looking at code. So yeah, the next one we have is from Stu Black. He's asking about large-scale concrete5 implementations that need a little bit more DevOps love than something that might be a little smaller. And he's asking, are there any examples of how concrete5 would handle a large site that needs something like load balancing?
Sure.
Yeah, I can speak to this a little bit. We work with a lot of clients that have big distributed load balanced systems that are like, split across multiple nodes that each handle their own amount of traffic, and they've got, sessions split out to something like memcached or something that you can share across nodes, and the same thing with cache. And that seems to work pretty nice. It's just, a real pain to manage. And we have found that by and large, we have not needed to load balance concrete5. It has been able to handle any kind of traffic we throw at it. The one exception being a static export site. But from our perspective, a lot of the time you can get away with just having a well-tuned single server and splitting out the SQL database just so that those things aren't kind of competing for the same resources. And we found that has been sufficient to run really every level of site that we've had so far. But we're definitely looking into things like load balancing and splitting these things across nodes just in terms of having fault tolerance and high availability. So if that answers your question, that's kind of a roundabout overview of our perspective on the issue.
Yeah. Step one, your database should not run on your web server. Like that's, if you haven't done that, do that right away. Have a separate database machine and a separate Nginx box, and that will buy you a whole lot of room to optimize each for its own job. Yeah, as Corbin pointed out, we do have some stuff where we'll use our static exporter, and we've built the static export functionality into Liberta server, which is our kind of emerging product for these larger DevOps big enterprise problems. And so what we'll do is actually export top level pages, category pages, kind of the busy parts of a website, put those in S3 and just let those sit in the edge cache. So that kind of absorbs the big hits of traffic. And then when you need to have interactive stuff, we can just forward it to a kind of a concrete5 server that is not so in demand. And yeah, you can move session to database and put it behind a load balancer if you want. Yes.
Cool. The last one I have in the list, unless we get another one during this answer, is from John the Fish again. He's asking, with regard to the new work we've done with the API, have we looked into the functionality that Manio Sync adds with syncing pages and content from one site to another and integrating any of that sort of functionality to use the new API?
No, I don't think we have, but it sounds interesting.
Yeah, no, I'm not familiar with that, but it sounds cool.
Yeah, definitely. I have a little bit of familiarity with it, but not much. I know that they use not necessarily an API, but an HTTP endpoint to download zip files of, I believe, like the CIF format, importing XML files or whatever you call them. So yeah, I definitely think that kind of thinking could be, modified to work with the kind of REST API that we have set up. It's just a matter of making sure that we have all the endpoints for inserting and requesting all that kind of stuff. So definitely something that's on our radar. As far as implementing sync specifically, it's not something that we've looked at too much. So
I mean, I think that next steps for the API on our end are more focus on kind of scaffolding things out in Express. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but that seems like the kind of the next step. We have the basic API framework, but we need some more details to it. I like the idea of kind of decentralizing content, FidoNet style. I don't know if passing a whole page over is as much as kind of ways of sharing typed content, but it's definitely interesting stuff.
Cool. Well, that's all I have on my list. I don't have any questions for you.
No questions from Corbin. What? All right, cool. Well, yeah, we're just at about an hour. So there you go. There's another concrete5 town hall. Thank you again to everybody who has contributed in so many different ways. We very much appreciate it. And pretty cool. I mean, we're like learning stuff. Learned all about community commerce, learned about some Minio sync thing I had no idea even existed. So yeah, I dig it. Anyways, I guess we will see you guys again in a month and online before then.
Yeah, it's interesting. Our next meeting is going to be actually a little later in the month. It's going to be the 7th of May. Yes, the 7th of May. So we'll see you then. Thanks for joining us, and bye.
Bye.